sometimes they're trying to fool you, okay? And they're trying to fool you by thinking that they'll call it cannabis. And everybody thinks cannabis means medicine. Now look it up. Cannabis means marijuana. And marijuana means cannabis. So when you see medical cannabis, don't be fooled to think that isn't marijuana. That's just my little thing. Anyway, Brad is going to speak to you about this subject today. He has worked very hard on this. He's been working with several people, including the Utah Medical Association, doctors and nurses and legislators, because the legislature didn't pass it. Brad's one of the reasons they didn't. And so he is going to speak with you today about medical marijuana.
Thank you. I've got the lapel mic here.
Oh, no wonder you sounded so loud.
Can everybody, yeah, that's not my natural voice. I have to say, I watched Dr. Pesta speak, and I was thinking, it'd be really cool if I could speak with that much energy and enthusiasm, but I realized that there just simply isn't that much caffeine anywhere for me. So I'm going to do the best I can to talk to you about a subject. Now, what's really interesting when we talk about medical marijuana, medical cannabis, whatever you want to call it, this subject has, for me, at least, generated more emotion, more heat, more angry rhetoric, more half-truths, untruths, all that kind of stuff than I've ever seen about any topic in my career. And I've seen a lot of rhetoric about a lot of other topics, but this one here has been, to me, just absolutely amazing across the board. And so when I hear that much rhetoric and when I hear that much emotion and all that stuff going on, what I want to do is I want to step back and I want to say, you know what? How did we get here? Why are we at this place? And what can we learn from history? I was talking with one of my colleagues there, and he said, it's really great to go back and look at history because a lot of times we can find similar things. We can see that people dealt with similar issues, and we can look at what solutions they came up with and how good or bad they worked. So I want to go back to the 1800s, and I want to ask all of you in the room here, how many of you here have heard the term snake oil? Yeah. You all have. Now, as a politician, I hear it all the time. Not me selling it, but I hear the term snake oil all the time. And of course, what we all have come to understand, what it means is if somebody is selling you snake oil, they're either selling you, at a basic idea, they're selling you a phony remedy. At a more general idea is they're trying to con you. They're trying to rip you off. What's interesting, and I thought, well, that might be kind of an interesting idea to talk about when we're talking about medical cannabis, is just kind of figure out what about snake oil. And so I went and I looked at the history of snake oil, and what I found out was actually incredibly ironic. The original snake oil actually worked. It was actually a real product. It was a real thing. What happened is during the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, as many of you know, a lot of Chinese immigrants came over and they worked on the railroad and they brought with them this oil that they had derived from a particular kind of Chinese water snake. And this oil did in fact have anti-inflammatory properties. It worked. And so that's where snake oil started. But then what happened is you had a gentleman whose name I don't recall. You had a gentleman who saw that people were starting to buy this snake oil. And so he thought, well, I'm going to one-up that. And he was, of course, from the same camp as P.T. Barnum, who believed that there was a sucker born every minute. And so he made a great show of taking a rattlesnake, because, of course, a rattlesnake is going to be better than this water garden snake, whatever it is. And he would sit there on stage. He would take the snake and dissect it and throw it in a big pot of boiling water, and all this oil would rise to the top, and he'd just sell it right out of there. And people were excited about that. They were getting rattlesnake oil. Well, the stuff was worthless, absolutely useless. In fact, it wasn't even really the rattlesnake oil. He had some way of slipping in just plain old vegetable oil. It was just boring stuff. It was worthless. And that's why we have the term snake oil now, meaning phony remedies, false ideas, the con, if you will. And as we talk about that, and as we think about snake oil, what comes to my mind is how exactly do we want to prevent that? Because there's really two ways we can do it. We can let people sell whatever they want to sell. We can let them say whatever they want to say about it. They can, whatever lie they want to make, whatever claim they want to make, that product can have whatever that product has in it. And people can use it and get absolutely no result from it, no relief. And in some cases, maybe not go another route that actually would give them some relief or some healing. We can go that route, but is that really what we want to do? Or do we want to go the route of saying, okay, there should be some agency, some way of verifying what a product is, what it does, what it's good for, and that this particular product is safe to use or works as directed. Now let me give you another example on the other side of the coin. You guys all remember these, we had these glow-in-the-dark, oh my gosh, glow-in-the-dark watch dials. You know, and they were, originally back in the 40s and 50s, yeah, not that kind. I got that too. No, back when it was radium, all right, it was actually a mildly radioactive substance. And back in the 40s and 50s, or maybe earlier, they had workers painting that radium on the watch dial. It was a very, very delicate, kind of a fine thing, and so they were using these very fine tip brushes. And what they had to do frequently was they'd lick their lips and they would kind of pinch the brush down to put the point back on it. Well, what happened over time was all of those workers who were doing that developed cancer. They got cancer from because there was no regulation on that radium paint. Nobody understood that radioactive substances cause cancer. And so that gets me back to my original question. How do you want to regulate this kind of behavior, this kind of activity? Do you want to wait until people get sick and die, or until all of these long-term symptoms come to light? Do you want to wait, in the case of, there's a product called thalidomide, do you want to wait until a woman who's taking the thalidomide to stave off morning sickness, you really want to wait until that birth defect, that baby comes out and has severe birth defects, and enough of them come out that you realize, oh, hey, there's a problem with that. Because if you do, that can happen. But if you want to do it the right way is to try to test, understand, and verify products ahead of time. That's the way that we've got to. And the reason we've gotten there on products, on food and drugs and cosmetics is because we've come to understand that by not going that way, it allows unscrupulous people, or even well-meaning people who just simply don't understand the chemistry of something, to con all of us and to sell stuff that's either dangerous or completely ineffective. And believe me, ineffective is almost as bad as dangerous, because ineffective will keep you often from getting a remedy that actually works, because the ineffective may be cheaper. And they'll tell you it works better when it doesn't. All right, so that's one way, that's one of the reasons why we have an FDA, why we have a Food and Drug Administration. Are they perfect? Oh, heavens no. Absolutely not. They're a bureaucracy, and they're an agency that we need to try to rein in and try to make more streamlined, but their function, the function they perform, which is verifying our food and our drugs, is really, really essential if we want to have a safe society, if we want to have food and drugs that we can trust. Now let me go the other route. This is where I wish Dr. Kennedy was here, because I was going to pick on him mercilessly. But how many of you here have met Dr. Mike, Representative Kennedy, Esquire? All right? Yeah. Is he your up there, Brandon? Okay, all right. So there you go. So Dr. Kennedy, he's a doctor and he's an attorney. He's a representative, and he's a good guy. Okay, but anyway, the thing is if you look on the trust scale, right near the top, in fact, number 2 on the kinds of professions that people trust are doctors. They're number two. Number one is nurses. My wife's a nurse. I just have to throw that out there. I'm not going to say who's at the bottom, but if you're running for office, you probably know who's at the bottom of the list. Hopefully none of us in this room qualify, but that's kind of where it gets to. But doctors are right near the top. Now, why? One of the reasons why is because doctors are held to a very high standard. In fact, every single time that you walk into a doctor's office, he is literally putting his license on the line to treat you. Because if he makes a mistake, whether it's even a big or a little mistake, if he makes a mistake that causes you some kind of harm, you have the ability to complain, and the DOPL, the Occupational Licensing Board, can give him a hard time. And that hard time can include such things as fines, such things as suspending his license, removing his license, and of course, if the mistake is egregious enough, you can sue him for for malpractice. All right. In other words, there's a very high standard there that doctors are held to. And that brings me back to my question. What kind of regulation do you want for doctors? Do you want the kind of regulation that says, okay, we'll let anybody who wants to call themselves a doctor, we'll let them do whatever they want, up to, surgery, give you whatever drugs they think that are good, okay, and then we'll just kind of the ones who actually mess up and make people sick and die, we'll go ahead and prosecute them. Is that what you want? Do you want after-the-fact regulation, or do you want regulation that says, okay, we want our doctors to be held to a high standard, we want them to understand and have an understanding of what medicine's all about, so that when you go in to a doctor and he's got that license, you have some understanding and some comfort that when they prescribe a course of medicine to you, that it's going to work, or at least it's going to work to whatever they tell you it's going to work. Not everything works perfectly, but it's going to have some positive effect for you, and it's not going to cause things to get any worse. So those questions are the ones I want you to have in mind when we come to the area of cannabis. And the reason why that's important is because we now have a proposal, two different ways that we can go with cannabis. One of them is we can go the route of, hey, just go take whatever until you get sick, and then hopefully we'll figure it out and stop doing it. And also the route of anybody can call themselves a doctor. They can prescribe whatever they want. We're not going to hold them to any kind of accountability whatsoever, and just kind of hope that works out. That's one route. That's a route being proposed right now through an initiative. That's a route we do not want to go down, I think. Or we can go the route that says, okay, you know what? There's some exciting properties in cannabis. Just like there's been some exciting properties in a whole bunch of other things. There's some exciting properties in willow bark. How many of you know where the aspirin came from? Willow bark. All right? There's some exciting properties in, I want to say nightshade, but that's not the right plant. There's a plant from which we got digitalis. A lot of the medicine we have now came from a plant. Cannabis is nothing new in that respect. It has some interesting properties. It appears to help with seizures. It appears to manage pain in some form. Those are things we know, but what we don't know and what we need to understand before anything else is what's the dosage, what are the side effects, what are the long-term effects, what's going to happen if we take it with another type of drug, is there any kind of interaction that goes on there? A lot of those questions, despite what you may have heard, have not been answered. And that's just the bottom line truth of it. They haven't been answered. You'll hear this plaint that there's been thousands of studies out there. Well, there's been a lot of interesting information. There's been a lot of studies having to do with Marinol, which is a synthetic THC. There's been some things that have gone on, but when you start talking about the kinds of studies that actually get you to, okay, here's what the dosage needs to be, here's what the actual effect is, here's the side effects, those kinds of studies are sorely lacking. And so if we want to go down the road of having cannabis be used as a medicine, great, let's go down that road. But let's not use that issue to start deregulating or unregulating, if you will, our whole medical system. Let's understand that cannabis has some exciting properties. Let's go down the road of finding out how to use it properly, what the research is, what it shows, so that our doctors, all of our doctors, can look at that research, they can understand it, and they can say, okay, now I get it, now it makes sense, now I know how to use it. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, the real dilemma we have, and the one that frankly we need to solve, either at the federal or the state level, and the federal level seems to be taking forever, is a simple fact that where cannabis is a plant-based formula. In other words, if the treatment is just an extract from the plant, it's not patentable. And why is that a problem? The reason that's a problem is for a company to actually take a product all the way through FDA approval process costs about $4 billion. That's billion with a B. Now, I don't know about you, maybe Vince can, but I can't write a check for $4 billion. You got that kind of money? Okay, Vince doesn't either. Okay, so I don't think anybody in the room has it. At least I don't believe it. So the point is, if I drop that $4 billion and then get that all the way through FDA approval, whatever it is, if it's not patentable, what's going to happen is on day one, somebody over there is going to buy the product, they're going to reverse engineer it, they're going to see exactly what ratios it has in it, what's in the product, and they're going to start making a copy of it. And guess what? I'll never recoup that $4 billion, which is a lot of money for everybody except, the federal government. That's even a lot of money at the state level. So what do we have to do? What we have to do, in my opinion, and what I'm trying to convince my colleagues of, and so far they've been pretty warm to the idea, is we need to set up a framework where that research can happen a lot less expensively, that we can realize that there's enough information out there that we're not starting at ground zero, we're starting here. We can move ahead. We can comfortably do the research in a way that doctors trust, and we can also have a system in place that would manage the production and processing of the plant to create these dosable forms that people could use, and then we'll have what I call legitimate medical products derived from the cannabis plant. That is the only reasonable way to go. If you go this route over here, what you're asking for is basically a step into anarchy. You're going to have doctors not behaving like doctors, and you're going to have product that has nothing to do with medicine. Let me tell you how it works on this side. I think I got just a couple minutes left here. Let me tell you how it works on this side over here. You go to a doctor and you say, my back hurts, or you go to a dentist. Of course, Alan would never do that. But you go to a dentist, or you go to, and this is where it gets fun, you go to a physician's assistant, you go to a nurse practitioner, you go to pretty much anybody who can prescribe anything, and you say, hey, my back hurts, I've got chronic backache, can I have a card? And that doctor, under this initiative can give you a card. And the doctor, if you taking whatever cannabis you take makes you sick or anything like that or doesn't work or whatever, do you know how much accountability that doctor has under the initiative? None. Doesn't matter. He cannot have any action for that. It says that right in the bill. So you have a card, no dosing, no information, no direction, just here's your card. And then you go to a dispensary where they have product that looks just like what you'd roll up into can I use the word doobie? Is that okay? Into a doobie and smoke it. That dates me, doesn't it? You do that, and it looks just like, but the initiative says you can't smoke it, even though you certainly can. All right? And you go there, and guess who becomes your guide to what you should get and how it should work for you? The person's name is called, you ready for this one? I just learned this last year. He's called a bud tender. Has anybody heard that term before? It's a BUD tender, bud tender. They're the ones, and do you want to know how much training they have in medicine? Exactly as much as a bartender does in medicine. None. They have no training whatsoever, no accountability, no nothing. They're the ones saying, hey, well, you should get this, blue lemon or blue diesel or Death Star, whatever, whatever they're selling, maybe whatever's on sale or what they have too much of, they're going to tell you to use that. I mean, because they have absolutely no guidance on what they tell you. They may, but they don't have to. There's nothing there. And of course, if they give you something and you get sick or whatever, they have no accountability either. Again, that's not medicine. Medicine is about you being able to go to a doctor, somebody you trust, somebody who's going to be held accountable if there's a problem, and being able to get prescribed specific doses of specific product, and then being able to go and buy that product from a pharmacist who actually understands all those interactions and all that information, and being able to look at the label on that product and say, yep, I know exactly what's in there. I know exactly what it's for, and I can trust that there's nothing bad in there. There's no heavy metals or anything like that. That's what medicine is. Initiative, that's not medicine. Going the right way, that can be, if we do it right, medicine. Thank you so much for your time.